my grind on.
Yeah. Holla at me. Holla at me. Holla at me. Holla at me. Holla at me.
Get my grind on.
Yeah. Holla at me.
Intrepidators, it's your Intrepid Songwriter chronicling my adventures as a songwriter, because seriously, who does that? And I'm here to help you get your songwriting career on the fast track. Today on the show, we have a man that you want to listen to. Okay, he has a thorough grasp of streaming royalties, of Spotify, of Pandora, you know, how they're dealing with artists, the climate that we live in now as songwriters. How are we supposed to work? How are we supposed to get paid? What kinds of things can we do? So you're going to want to listen to this, man. You're going to enjoy our interview today. Let me introduce you to Mr. JJ Italiano. How you doing, JJ?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for being on the show.
Cool. Of course, man. It's my pleasure.
Now listen, now we met at a Hypebot event here in the city. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got that event set up?
Sure. Well, I just recently came to Chicago for maybe a couple months ago. And so I've always been tight with the folks at Hypebot, particularly Kyle Boleyn, who's a really good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And we got to talking and we realized that really there had never been a Hypebot meetup in Chicago. And I think this city is got a tremendous amount of talent. There's a lot of artists and there's a lot of people in the DIY stuff. And it's really kind of underrepresented in terms of the larger conversation. So what's cool about being in New York and LA is that there's events like these where people that are, you know, anyone that's interested in the business can kind of go and meet up with other people that are in the business. And there hadn't been one here yet, certainly not from Hypebot. So we figured we'd give it a shot. We've done one so far, you know, hopefully we'll do a couple more. And yeah, it'll be good.
Well, I had a great time. I love the people that I met. There was so much innovation and so much creativity going on. So, I mean, it was just like a great move. So, cool. You know, so next time you have one, let me know. I'll pub it on my channel to make sure we get more people out.
Yeah, we'll blast it out to everybody. Hopefully in the next month or so here. So we'll have another one.
Oh, fantastic. That soon. Great, great. I'm looking forward to it. Now tell us a little bit more about your personal background, how you got into the music industry and the kinds of things that you've done.
Sure. So I went to college to study music industry studies at CU Denver. Mm-hmm. And then immediately after graduating college, I moved out to Los Angeles. I took an internship at a company called the Agency Group, mm-hmm. which anybody keeping up is very recently in the news as being acquired by UTA. But it was one of the larger booking agencies that are still kind of independent. So I went out there. I did that grind for a minute. I kind of paid my dues working with the agents, and then was promoted to be an assistant. And then slowly but surely kind of got a chance to do a little bit more hands-on stuff. And I learned a lot through that process. And then in 2008, this band, the Flowbots, were my friends from college, and I loved the band, and they put out a record that I was really, really excited about. So I started managing them kind of first on the side, and then started my own little small management company at that point. And, they had a big record. I guess I did that in 2007. And then in 2008, they had a really big record release. And as that became my full-time job. So I left Agency Group and started managing. And after that, for about 9 years, just manage bands almost exclusively, which is a great way to learn how things work. I've always been a big nerd for this business, and especially the way it changed, particularly on the digital side. And I never really had any experience with, it's so easy, I think, on the outside looking in to make judgments about how the industry is or how it works. But when you're dealing with it firsthand, when I was 24, so getting a lot thrown at you really quick was a really, really cool way to learn a lot. So I did Flowbots, and I did this band, I Fight Dragons, is from Chicago, and a bunch of punk rock bands, Big B and the Kids Table and the Mad Caddies and stuff like that. And I inevitably moved to New York. And I had a really short stint, probably about 8 or 9 month stint, working at Universal, kind of on the opposite side, being the product manager. So you're kind of the opposite role. You're kind of playing a lot the same role as you play as a manager, except on the label's behalf. So that was a really surreal experience, kind of dealing with product managers for my clients at Atlantic and other labels, and then being the product manager dealing with other managers at Universal. So that was kind of a crazy kind of way to keep two worlds in one head. And after that, I left after Universal. I went on, I've done a couple different soirees into the tech space, mostly in fan club ticketing. And I'm really, really interested in direct-to-fan ticket marketing. And that's pretty much all I've been doing since then. A series of kind of upstart ideas that either take or they don't take, and a serial entrepreneur at this time. I also do a little producing and writing stuff too, but right now I'm more of a jack of all trades after all of that run.
I can definitely
also, yeah, I guess I'm a professor of music industry studies at University of Colorado, Denver now, which is where I went to school, and now I've worked as a professor there as well.
Wow, you just kind of casually threw that out. Oh, by the way, I'm a professor.
Well, yeah, it's part time. Yeah, part time. So it's certainly not my full time gig. I'm not doing this semester, but I'm a big fan of that program and what they do.
That's quite impressive, and I can definitely relate to the serial entrepreneur part about starting businesses and just loving the energy that comes with doing that. Because that's something you either love or you don't. You can't fake that. So
I think as an artist right now, I think, there are a tremendous amount of resources out there for helping someone or for just learning about entrepreneurship and what it means to start a business. And I think in the modern landscape of music, we like to represent as being very dystopian and things are bad. But the reality is there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for small ideas to pay your bills. And so I think, every artist should be interested in those kinds of things. And I think anyone who wants to be in the music business should really be interested in those things too. It's running a business and building a business is its own skill set, and it'll take you an entire lifetime to learn how to do it. I feel like I'm like 40% of the way there. Like after my 50th failed endeavor, then I'll probably be an expert.
And well, that's what all the greats say. I mean, Thomas Edison, failed all the time. Jordan said he's failed all the time. Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth, the idea is to keep swinging. That's the idea.
That's it.
So
tell
me this now, based on the experience you just talked about, what's the number one mistake you've seen starter bands make? Like when they first come out, the number one thing that they all mess up and do is what?
In my experience as a manager and also as a producer, I think that the biggest stumbling block for most artists is this kind of attachment to outcome and attachment to the past. So not to get too hippie philosophical here, but it takes a long time for most people to make it in this business, or really any business. And I think when you start being so attached to the way that things were done, or, this is the way we've always done it, so that it assumes that we should just keep doing it this way, that's usually when people run into problems. And honestly, in almost every business I've ever been in, that's been a major problem, but especially for bands, because you have most overnight successes are about 5 years in the making. So most people, nobody just pops. And you're being able to change and roll with the punches and try new things, that's really important. And it flies in the face of what I think a lot of the times artists think is like, this is me, this is who I am. We don't make shoes, we're making art. So kind of everything you do is a reflection of who you are. And I think if you get too attached to doing it one way, that's a problem. It's a major problem for bands that are starting to get bigger. When it's like, when you have to start scaling back and maybe not playing as many local shows so you can get your ticket sales a little higher, when you need to start, concentrating your efforts so you can get a little bit more excitement about one particular project, that can sometimes be really hard to do when for the last couple of years you've been just grinding, taking every show, playing every gig, releasing everything on SoundCloud instantly. That's a real hard barrier for most artists, and I'm sympathetic to it. It's tough.
Makes a lot of sense too. All right, now tell me this. What's the one thing you wish you would have known when you first started in the industry?
Dang. All right, I'll keep it 100% real here. 100% real. If there's one thing that I wish it's not quite something I would have known, but I think a friend of mine used the term sandbox etiquette. I think being able to play well with others is really, really, really important. And this is a business of like, I don't think that I've certainly never been, I don't think, a hard person to work with. I try to be really friendly and nice to everyone and certainly respectful. But I think that to the point I made before, your willingness to be able to give and take and work with other people and compromise on is really, really, really important. And so I think that certainly that's been a lesson that I've learned over time. And if I could have at 22 realized like, okay, listen, like sometimes you got to just, put up with a lot of stuff you might not necessarily want to put up with, to be able to make other people happy. Because it's not just important that the people you work with are paid and satisfied, but I think it's also really important that they feel heard and that they get their way. Yeah, I think everybody needs to get their way every now and then. And that's something looking back, maybe I wasn't always great about it. It was like my way or the highway a lot of the time. And I think a lot of people, especially younger people, but especially creative types, get into that space. So
and entrepreneurs as well, because normally entrepreneurs are very driven people, and you very much have a singular vision, and so you just want people to kind of come alongside it and support it, and it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could say I had it figured out, but I think that's something that I'm always kind of playing with in my head is that am I at my best? Am I at my best when I'm insistent and driven on what I want? Cause a lot of time I feel like I'm at my best that way, like, okay, well, if everybody does what I say, it's going to work out fine. And sometimes I'm right. But a lot of the time I'm wrong. Find a good combination between that. Cause on the other kind of polar opposite, you don't want to be so flexible with your craft and with what's important to you that you kind of end up putting out stuff that's mushy and bland and you kind of half start on a lot of ideas. So I think it takes artists and entrepreneurs, I think both have to be really confident and really forceful in their initiative, but you really do have to take into consideration everyone else's feelings and making sure that there's room for everybody when they feel that spark.
All right, now let's talk about money. In particular, let's talk about streaming. Let's talk about some of the stuff you said before. Explain to our audience what the model is for streaming, particularly with Spotify and Pandora, and why that's been causing such a problem in the last several years.
Sure. Well, to make it as simple as possible, Spotify's current model is actually, I think, very unfairly criticized a lot. Spotify's current model is they take all of the revenue from all of the money that's coming in for either they kind of split it into the free tier and the paid tier. They take all the revenue and then they cut 70% of that revenue goes back to rights holders. So Spotify's profit is 30% from that revenue. At that point, that 70% gets distributed to the rights holders for the mechanicals for the publishing. The way that they do that is they look at the total number of streams platform wide and the total amount of money, and then they calculate that, they just divide that total amount of money by the total number of plays, and that's how you get that royalty rate. So we get that 0.00 whatever royalty rate that people are often upset about. It's a weird, the downside of that, and why I think it gets criticized a lot is it does take a little bit of the buying power out of the consumer's hands, right? So if I don't listen to Spotify as often, less of my money is going to what I'm listening to because it's paying out to the rights holders stream by stream rather than taking, my $9 or my $9.99, taking $7 of that and splitting it up to who I listen to. It's taking all of the music, all of the songs that were streamed and splitting up based on all the songs that were streamed platform wide. So it makes it feel kind of like it's not fair to a lot of people. I think that it would be cool the other way around. It's impossibly difficult and it would create, a slew of other problems. There's always going to be criticism on how the system works, but ultimately that's the state of it right now. The reason why maybe the money doesn't necessarily come to artists all the same way is because different record deals, different publishing deals work different ways. And there's a lot of money that kind of is still going into a lot of intermediary systems, and it's hard to track. Record contracts are extremely difficult to understand for most people. If you're not a lawyer, it can be kind of hard to understand how that's going to work. And so it's hard to speak to, to say that Spotify is intrinsically bad or that their royalty rates are intrinsically bad is kind of hard. It's hard to say. I don't know that it's necessarily on Spotify. I think this is a whole system that's in its infancy. that will no doubt get better over time. There's no question that the more people that are subscribing to streaming services, the more money will be in the pot. How we craft deals moving forward will make a huge impact on how that money works for everybody. But UMG just posted its first significant profit in a really long time. So in many ways, on the industry side, the streaming is starting to pay off. I mean, there's money that's coming in from these systems, not to mention these equity shares that the major companies are getting. So that being said, Spotify is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be really, really hard for artists to figure out where all of this is coming from, like how are they going to make money? And the other big problem I think for small artists is, let's say you're a local Chicago musician and you have 500 fans that want to listen to your record. That's, $10 a CD is $5,000, right? So it's not going to break the bank, but that $5,000 is really great for making a video or for, putting a down payment on a van or whatever.
Right.
Nowadays it's a little bit tough. I mean, that the importance of that $5,000, it's some of the most important money you'll ever make. Whereas later on, if you had a platinum record and make $5,000, you're like, and then you go get dinner. But when you're starting out, $5,000 is a lot of money. And so that can be a huge problem now, because now if 500 people listen to your record and you're making 0.000 whatever cents per stream, you're not getting you're not getting $10 off of all those fans. You're getting, a couple pennies. And that can have a real effect in terms of the power of recorded music. That being said, your reach is easier, and the amount and your ability to sell tickets is better, because there's less barrier of entry. If you want someone to check out your band now, you don't have to ask them for $10. You can say, pull it up on your phone right now and listen to my song right now. And if you like it, come to my show. So there's a give and take there too.
Well, you hit on an important point, because you're talking about the trade-offs, because there are always trade-offs in life, in any situation. And what you're talking about is what we gain as artists from the music being available on all our different devices and platforms versus how much money that actually gives back to us, as opposed to if we go direct to market, if we're going fan to fan, obviously a larger chunk of the pie, but a much smaller cross-section of people until you learn how to play sold-out stadiums. And even then, it's not the same as worldwide exposure.
Right. I mean, it's the system's always changing. There's one constant. I'm often reminded of this conversation I had with Pink Floyd's manager. Mm-hmm. And Pink Floyd's manager in Dark Side of the Moon, the era, and he was like, when I started in this business, you signed a record deal knowing that you'd never see another dime from those people, and you'd make your money playing gigs. Mm-hmm. And as far as I see it, it's the same way. And it's funny kind of how in many ways we've gone full circle there. Like, another mistake that I feel like that a lot of people make is we really undermine the significance and importance of record labels and management companies and these intermediaries that serve purposes. And, it's easy to be like, well, we can, and I'm just as guilty of it as anybody, being like, DIY punk rock, do this myself. But that doesn't mean to undermine that these other systems are useless. And, usually you're getting something for your money if your money is getting eaten up by a major, or you're getting something from your money if your money is being eaten up. It might not always be the most valuable, and you might sometimes be getting more than you're paying for, and you might sometimes be getting less than you're paying for. But ultimately,
how do you get more than what you're paying for? How does that happen, for example?
Well, I guess that's to say, some people have a great relationship with their labels, and some labels there are people that work so hard at record labels, mm-hmm. indies and majors, mm-hmm. that a lot of the time you get a great deal, for the amount of your money that company is eating up. They do great work for you, and you make a lot more money on the road, and you live a pretty great life. That can happen. Also, what can happen is that you end up in a record deal where maybe the label doesn't get you as well, or maybe there's organizational problems, or maybe you're not a priority artist, and a big chunk of a smaller amount of money is going to these people who maybe aren't doing a great job. And it's that it'd be the same thing if you have hired a plumber. Like sometimes you have a good plumber, sometimes you don't, right? It's like it's it's just kind of the way that system works. I think that we run into real problems when we start talking in absolutes about labels are all pointless or labels are all bad or I don't know that I've heard anybody say labels are all good recently. But any of that, there's so much gray area here that I think it's really important for independent artists and larger artists to really understand that the intricacies of their business, rather than to kind of go into those really dark spaces of Spotify's all bad, the label's all bad, everybody's all bad. I think that can hurt you a lot more than it can help you.
What would be the best case scenario if artists could have it the way they want it? Because I'm saying to myself, they have to front all of those costs to put you everywhere that they put you, and to get you on Good Morning America, to get you on a TV show, everything that they do to get your music out there. So would artists expect for them to spend all that money and then the artists make all the money? Or were they expecting like a 50-50 split? Are they expecting a percentage after recoup? What would be the best case scenario if we could have it like we wanted it?
Well, this is something that I changed my mind on a lot. When I started in this business, I hate to say it because it's going to make me seem like a jerk, but I think like a lot of people, you come in trying to get as much money out of these labels and publishers as you can possibly get, and while giving them the least amount back. And as the business has changed, that's not a good way to do business in general. I think being fair and equitable and making sure that people are incented to work on your project is really, really important. It's not great. Selfishness is not always great business. And that's really hard as an artist to grab. I mean, being an artist doesn't make you an entrepreneur. They're two skill sets, and you really got to learn them both. And for me as a manager, I feel like I've learned a lot the hardest way. So I do think right now labels, especially indie labels, are cutting pretty good deals. 50-50 net splits are pretty good deals. It all depends on how hard those people are working for you. When I worked inside a major, I worked at Republic. It's the biggest market share label, and I was really, really humbled and amazed by how hard those people worked. Even if I didn't agree with a particular strategy, or even if I saw something that I was critical of, I would never question the intention of those people to do a great job. Mm-hmm. Just sometimes and honestly, they do a good job more often than they do a bad job, by a pretty significant margin. It really depends on what you get. You're a manager's commission could be too much or too little based on how hard that person's working. But it really does come down to the relationships and what people are doing and how hard people are working. And so I think we talk a lot about money in this business, especially from the outside looking in. But if someone were to give me $500,000 to work a project, and someone were to give Republic $500,000 to work a project, Republic would do a better job. It's not about money. It's about the people that work there. So having good people, building a team of great people is the most important thing. It's way more important than money. I think especially right now, as artists are coming into big sums of money through Kickstarter, you have $100,000 to spend. People are starting to realize pretty quickly how money wasn't always the challenge here. Like competence is a challenge here, knowing what you're doing. And it takes so many moving parts to really get to really be successful on a big level in this business. So, I think it's, in a weird way, I think it's not always best practice to be thinking so much about the deal itself and to think a little bit more about the team and who you're bringing in. That's a lot more important. Some
very interesting points, because one of the things that jumped out at me is you pretty much don't know what you're getting. You're going to kind of have to roll with what you get, and maybe over time build a team that you want, or find a label that's more to your liking, because there's no standard. There's no bar.
Right.
There's no one place where we all agree labels should be doing this. All we can do is measure results and measure if it's a good fit and see if it's, what we had in mind or whatever. But there's no
Right.
standard, man. There's nothing there to say, well, you guys aren't measuring up here, so you're failing.
Right, right. And that's where it's different from the plumber, right? Because the plumber, you like, hey, you're a bad plumber, you're fired. You can't really do that with something I say a lot to prospective management clients, because I've been kind of in and out of the management game for a while. It's not my primary focus anymore. But I still want to help bands where I can, and I'm certainly open to doing that again. But bands come to me a lot as just like, maybe having had a bad experience with another manager or really confused about something. And I try to spend a lot of time talking to artists that, just as a friend or as a counselor. And one of the big things that is pretty recurring, especially in stories of bad management, is like, you'll never have less leverage and no less than when you sign your first management deal, or your first, record deal. Agents and lawyers you can always fire, but those big agreements that are usually over a long period of time, they're very, very tricky, because you don't know how well the chemistry is going to work over time. A lot of the time it's the luck of the draw. So you could have a manager and it doesn't work really well, and then now this manager's got a sunset clause on you, and not to mention the psychological effects of maybe having a bad experience. As a manager, the hardest thing in the world is to deal with an artist that had a bad experience with their manager before. It's like, it's like dating someone with serious relationship.
It's like a divorce. Yeah. Now,
exactly.
Explain to our audience what a sunset clause is. What does that mean?
So a sunset clause is it's not in all management contracts, but in a way I actually think it's a good function. But it says a manager gets, after the term of the management agreement, the manager gets a certain percentage of commission for a certain period of time after they're no longer your manager. And the reason why that's in there, and the reason why I actually kind of think it's a good thing, is because a manager is trying to build your career in the long term. So if a management deal is, anywhere between 2 and 5 years, usually mine are always like 2, and then we extend it if we want. But I've noticed that there's something kind of bad about that, because if my job is to make as much money off of you in 2 years, I'm going to make a lot of decisions that would be different if my job was to make you the most amount of money for 20 years. Mm-hmm. You want people to be incented in your company. So it's different from if you were in a CEO type role at a small company or a startup, where you have a vesting stock option and you own a percentage of that company moving forward. So you're always incented for the long-term success of the company. Commission deals don't work that way. So that's the good thing about sunset clauses. The reason why a lot of artists and a lot of people talking on the outside looking in this business are critical of sunset clauses is because it just feels icky to be giving somebody money when they're not working for you anymore. We don't like that idea. And if you have a bad relationship with the manager, that can be crippling. If I was paying somebody 20% for 2-3 years, and now they're getting 10% for the next 5 years or whatever. Mm-hmm. Now, if I get somebody new for 20%, that line item is 30%. 30% of my gross income is going right out the door to 2 guys now, and that can be really, really, really hard, especially if you have a couple people in the band. There's just not a lot of money left in the pot. So that's sunset clauses in a nutshell. But again, I avoid thinking that they're all good or all bad. But I think that they're in there for a purpose, and it can go well, it can go not so well.
Do you think
depending on the manager?
Do you think that the development deal is dead?
No, I mean, I think that those are coming back in a big way. I think they're equally scary, because if you get a good one, it's great. The deals that producers are doing now that are similar to management deals is, come in, record. You don't have any money to record. You don't have any money to pay for these writers. I'll help you. I'll service you to the labels. Maybe I'll be your manager, or maybe I'll help you find a manager. And usually what they ask for on the back end is a lot. So when you get into anything where you're sharing gross commissions, that can be really, really, really big, because there's just not that much money in this business. It's like anything. It grows. You need operating capital to continue to grow. If you can't afford to do a bus tour, you have to do in the van because your 10% of your gross is going to some other guy from some other part of your past. That could be the difference of you keeping that guitar player or not. because that guitar player who knows what would happen if the quality of life was better. So money in businesses is a lot like energy. I've kind of found it's like it comes in. I think you got to be willing to spend it. You got to be able to spend money smart. But when there's production deals, development deals, and a management deal, and all this other stuff, people start to get really guarded about the money because so much of it's already spoken for before it comes in. You're basically paying this debt from the past. It's like hard to build a business with.
Well, it's like tipping in a restaurant. The bill is for the food, but the tip is for the service. It sounds like, with sunset clauses, the initial commission is for the work, but the sunset clause is for the success. Like if I actually get you to a point where you're doing what you want to do, it's because of my work, so I deserve a piece of that, is the thinking.
Right.
Whether or not you agree.
That's a great point, and that's a great tip for people that are looking to cut those deals. If you have a trigger, that'd be like in a contract, we call it a trigger clause. Mm-hmm. But let's say, okay, there's no sunset unless we gross this much amount of money during the term, or we sign this deal. If we sign this record deal, then you get the sunset. That's a really, really, really great compromise, I think. I do think managers deserve long-term compensation for building businesses. I've never held anyone to a sunset clause. And I really wish I had. There's a lot of things that I feel like, I worked really hard for and then kind of watched that thing go when it was done. And that was really frustrating. It makes me not want to do it again. And I think good business people would recognize that quicker than I did. On the other hand, as an artist, if you're paying a sunset clause to your first manager who didn't do much for you because that was just in the deal, now you're paying 2 commissions, and that's a huge, huge problem. Massive, massive problem. So that's a really smart thing to do.
Well, I tell my students that all the time when they make statements like, the record business is full of crooks. I'm like, that's not true. All the people I work with are extremely reputable and they do what they do well. Many times what the problem is an undereducated artist. You don't understand how the game goes. You don't get what it is you're stepping into. And like you said at the beginning, you don't understand how much energy and effort it's going to take because you basically just have stars in your eyes. I just want to blow up. I want to be everywhere. I want to beat the VMAs. I want to beat the Grammys. I want all the perks. But the people that are able to do that is because they have a team of people working literally around the clock, making that happen.
Right.
So, yeah, no, I get you. That's a great perspective, though. Kind of hearing it from both sides.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes both ways, man. It's like, listen, I have label horror stories and times when I was really unhappy with the label. Uh-huh. But I'm older now and looking back at my experience, I'll bet you anything that there are label people that have horror stories about dealing with me. So I think, I think patience is something you learn over time. And I think being able to recognize that there are good people in this business, and usually if somebody rubs you the wrong way or they do the wrong thing, more often than not, they're not trying to screw you over. There are those people. There will always be people that are sharks. That's what they do. They want to get the best out. They want to get over on you. Mm-hmm. But far and away, they're in the minority. Most people love music. They love this business, and they want to do the best possible job. They just sometimes don't really know, right? I mean, sometimes you just don't. You might not see eye to eye, and that those things happen. And it's challenging because in a record deal or management deal, you can't go back. You're in the deal. That you're married, that person.
That's right. That's exactly.
I think that's where the horror stories come.
And the divorce is going to be ugly 9 times out of 10. Now
divorces are getting easier too. I mean, that's the thing that these days, because there's less money in the pot, labels let people go. I've had labels let me go when I wanted to go, and I will say this especially, like, shout out again to Republic and Monty Lippman. When I wanted out of that deal, they made it extremely easy for me. I felt like I was treated with a lot of respect and dignity. And I think that happens a lot more now too. You never hear that story. You never hear the story of the guy that wants out of his record deal, and then the label's like, I understand you want out, and I'll take care of you. And that happens. you'll never hear that story,
No,
but it
that is
happened.
definitely not the stories that are told more often, but you're right. I mean, that's good to
Yeah.
hear, because that
Yeah.
keeps you optimistic that you can connect with people that realize, when you've come to the end of your time together, no need to throw a tantrum. Let's just move on.
Right.
But tell me this, what do you
Right.
know about publishing deals? And what have you seen for songwriters with publishing or co-publishing? Have you dealt with any of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Well, tell me
I've
about
seen
that.
a lot of them. Publishing is a lot the same way, man. It's like, I'll put it this way: the publishing deals that I've cut have usually been with bands that had something going at radio or had a record deal.
Mhm.
So I'm not an expert on the other side of that for dealing with writers specifically or producers specifically. Most of the stuff has been on the artist side, and the majority of our negotiating points have been a lot easier because when you know how much something's getting attention at radio, and you can make projections of what the record sales are going to be like, at that point brass tacks pretty well how much mechanical money is coming in. You've already cut your record deal. You know how much money you're negotiating with. So at the same time, you need a publisher. Again, it's another one of those things. There are people that work their butts off, publishing companies, to do a lot of really important stuff. We tend to look at it and say, well, these people will help you get a commercial or help you get a movie placement. We look at syncs, and syncs gets so much attention because that's the most obvious thing that those people do. But administering or publishing and collecting and having collective bargaining agreements with big people to play a lot of music, that's nothing you're ever going to do on your own. It's extremely difficult to do on your own, and so you got to have a publisher in those situations. So that's always been my experience, has been like, I'm negotiating a deal I need them, they want me, and I know why they want me, usually because I know about how much money they're going to get in the first 3 months that we're working together. So that's the majority of my experience in that case. That's not necessarily common. A lot of people are dealing with publishing deals well before they have any success, or they're writers and they're writing for other people. So I'm not as much an expert in that space. I'm aware of it. But for the most part, I'm dealing with really brass tacks. It feels a little bit more like getting an SBA loan than it does feel like signing a deal. How much money do I need now? How much money will I take from them? How much money are they going to make, over time? And are these people the right fit? Are these people going to understand what we want to do? I've been really fortunate with publishers. I've never, ever had a problem with a publisher. I've worked with Sony ATV and Warner Chappell, and both have been great. Absolutely great to work with. So that was my experience.
That's fantastic, man. You've been fortunate. All right. Well, just a few more questions. We'll wrap up. What are you working on now that you'd like to share with our audience?
I'm in between projects right now, man. So I'm always looking at bands. I'm working on there's a band from Denver, Colorado called Eldrin. We're putting a record out later. Well, it's already out on Spotify and iTunes, and we got a record. The album release is slated for October 10th for physicals. October 10th, and that's that. And besides that, man, I'm just chilling. I've just moved to Chicago, so I'm getting used to life here. And that's about it.
Now, how can people contact you if there's some bands that want you to check them out, or we want to find you online? How can we do that?
Twitter at JJ Italiano. I'm pretty active on Twitter, so if people hit me up on Twitter, I will see it.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show today, man. I mean, it's such great information, and you have so many practical experiences in a variety of settings. So I think that's really great. And I mean, it just shows your tenacity and your drive, because as you know, business is not for the faint of heart. You really got to want to be here. So,
right.
So yeah,
right.
Man, I just applaud all of your accomplishments. I think that's awesome.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure to be here. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. All right.